Hello ma'am, good afternoon. Today we are from Group 10. We would like to present Deborah Tanen's theory. So our group consists of three members. For group members, please introduce yourself.
Hello, ma'am. Hello, everyone. I am Ayu Devi Pujayani. I am as the first speaker. Thank you.
Hello, ma'am. Hello, everyone. I am Hendra Efendi as the last speaker. Thank you.
Hello ma'am, my name is Ari Arthawati as the second speaker. Thank you. So for the first material will be presented by Devi Pujayani. Devi, time is yours.
Okay. Next slide, please. Okay. Today we are going to present about the issue about women and men use language differently has historically been very popular, and it has become a very interesting topic to be discussed. Today we are going to discuss the differences between women and men in using language based on Deborah Tanen's theory. Before we continue to explain her theory, we should know who Deborah Tanen is. Next slide, please. Okay, Deborah Tanen is a university professor and professor of linguistics at Georgetown University. She is the author of many books and articles about how the language of everyday conversation affects relationships. Next slide, please. Tanen has written a very famous book entitled You Just Don't Understand Women and Men in Conversation in 1990, which the book describes men and women language in six contrasting series. The book also brought gender differences in communication style to public awareness. Next slide, please. Deborah Tanen is well known for the different model of women and men in using language. In 1990, Tanen suggests that socialization is things telling us how to be a boy and how to be a girl begins when we are children. Tanen stated, men and women have each speech style in six different ways. Consists of first, the first one is status versus support. The second one, independence versus intimacy. The third one, advice versus understanding. Next, information versus feelings. Then orders versus proposals. And the last one is conflict versus compromise. Each of the series comes with an explanation of the nature that influence men and women use the language in each way. The language and gender is in the way men and women use language in conversation and writing in regard to the reflection of their gender. Men and women are different in their way of communication. It's not something new for us. In her best-selling book, You Just Don't Understand, Women and Men in Conversation, Deborah Tannen proposed that women and men have difficulty communicating with one another, in part because they interpret messages in fundamentally different ways. Next slide, please. Okay, each of the series come with an explanation of nature that influence men and women use the language in each way. The language and gender is in the way men and women use language in conversation and writing in regard to the reflection of their gender. Men and women are different in their way of communication. It's not something new for us. In her best-selling book, You Just Don't Understand Women and Men in Conversation, Deborah Tannen proposed that women and men have difficulty communicating with one another, in part because they interpret messages in fundamentally different ways. Next slide, please. Okay. For example, pay attention to this conversation as an example. Woman. Woman says, my dress is not too short, isn't it? And the man answers, just change. From the conversation, the woman asked the dress is actually looking for an understanding of the doubtful feeling of her choice for the dress. But for the man, it is interpreted merely as a question that looks for an advice of what to do. In the woman's eyes, she thinks that the man is not supportive. In his eyes, however, he is being supportive because men don't talk to each other about their troubles unless they really do want a solution, or talking about their problems is wallowing in them. The man doesn't realize that his woman was simply trying to establish a certain kind of intimacy with him, inviting him to respond and share with her. The way men and women communicate differently brings interest for Tanen to study the difference between men and women in the use of language, so that men and women can truly understand each other and have a good talk. Her study found some common areas of conflicts between men and women ways of communication. Next slide, please. Okay, the first difference is status versus support. Next slide, please. Okay, men's speech style is very competitive, seeking to achieve the upper hand in a conversation, trying to prevent other participants in a conversation from dominating them. They see language as a way to gain and maintain status and use it as such. Meanwhile, Meanwhile, women often play a more supportive role and speak for confirmation, especially when in a conversation with men. Men grew up in a world in which a conversation is often a contest, either to achieve the upper hand or to prevent other people from pushing them around. For women, however, talking is often a way to exchange confirmation and support. In short, communication for men is a place to try to achieve and maintain status. Meanwhile, for women, communication is a network of connections seeking support and consensus. Okay, next slide, please. Men in conversation are seeking for the establishment of status. They are more valuable than others. While women are looking for networks and connection where they can share, minimizing differences, and finally get support from the community. The difference of maintaining status and seeking for support can be seen clearly in the example that I will explain. Next slide, please. For maintaining status, the example is there are two friends, Brian and Roy. Roy asked a question to Brian about a girl or a lady in a picture. Roy asked to Brian, Brian, the girl in the picture is very beautiful. Your girlfriend? Then Brian replies, what do you think? Come on, bro, where is your logic? You know she is not my girlfriend but my sister. So why do you ask such a silly question? The explanation is, Roy asked Brian whether the girl in the picture is his girlfriend or not. But Brian answers by asking another question. What do you think? Instead of giving information needed, Brian is not supporting Roy this way. By asking, what do you think? Brian shows his superiority in the way he thinks of being more logical than Roy's way of thinking. That example of maintaining status. Maintaining status. Next slide, please. How about seeking for support? Okay, here is the example. On weekends, Lisa made a story on her social media stating that she was alone again. Then Jack replied to the story. Jack, why didn't you text me if you were alone? Lisa answered, I didn't text you because I felt sleepy a while after I uploaded my story. So I immediately put my phone on the table and I lay down on my bed. Okay. There are two people, Lisa and Jack. Lisa provided the answer and explanation needed to a question asked by Jack. On weekend, Lisa made a story on her social media stating that she was alone again. Then Jack replied, why didn't you text me if you were alone again? Then Lisa replies by giving the explanation and answer. By giving such a clean answer, Lisa supported Jack's question by providing the right information for him. In this case, Lisa tried to show their friendship by supporting Jack's request for information. It shows that they interact and share with each other. Then they can support each other. That's an example of seeking for support. Okay, the next. Okay, then the next differences in Deborah Tanen's theory is independence versus intimacy. Next slide, please. For men, due to their conservative status, focus on being independent. For example, a husband would not ask his wife if he can bring over a friend to visit his house. It is because the husband maintains his independence. Meanwhile, for women consider language as a way to perpetuate intimacy as well as preserve it. For example, a wife would ask her husband before inviting a friend over. Next slide, please. Okay. Since women often think in terms of closeness and support, they struggle to preserve intimacy. Men concerned with status tend to focus more on independence. These qualities can lead women and men to starkly different views of the same situation. Tanen notes that men are confused by various ways of women use conversation to be intimate with others. One of these ways she calls as troubles talk. Okay, Deborah Tanen says, for women, talking about troubles is the essence of connection. Like this, I tell you my troubles, you tell me your problems, and we are close. Meanwhile, for men, however, hear troubles talk as a request or advice, so they respond with a solution. When a man offers this kind of information, the woman often feels as he is trying to diminish her problem or cut her off. Next slide, please. Okay, Tanen 1990 notes that in the world of status, independence is the key, while intimacy belongs to another world that is connection. Men will look for independence and will try to maintain the status by, for example, make decision without discussing it with their partner. Okay, discussion before making every single discussion is threatening their freedom to act, their independence. While most women will be glad, the women will be happy to have discussion with their partners. Okay, while most women will be glad to have discussion with their partners in every turn they make. The women will be happy with that. They appreciate it as evidence of involvement and different. I think they appreciate it. Okay, the women appreciate it as evidence of involvement and communication, which are seen as features of intimacy. Furthermore, Tanen's 1990 differentiates intimacy and independence by giving way of thinking for intimacy as I repeat it once again. Tanen 1990 differentiate intimacy and independence by giving way of thinking for intimacy as we are close and the same, while for independence as we are separate and different. That's about the first and the second differences based on Deborah Tenan's story. For the next differences will be explained by the next member of this group. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Devi. Now I would like to present the third difference. So it's about advice versus understanding. So Tanen states that men like to find and offer solutions, whereas women seek for sympathy and understanding or emotional support for their problems. Tanen also states that in a conversation, women say something that bothers them to ask for support and understanding. So they are looking for the confirmation that what they feel is common and that others also feel the same, like the same as they do. While men are distinctive in the way they say something that bothers to for them, and then in order to look for solution. It is an advice to solve the bothering things that matter for them. Say, for example, when my mother tells my father she doesn't feel well, my father offers her to go to the doctor and take medicine. But then my mother feels disappointed because uh, she feels disappointed because my father's reaction. So because my mother only wants sympathy and understanding from my father. So that's for the example. Okay, let's move to the fourth difference. So it is information versus feelings. Now, men are more likely to be factual in their speech than women or message oriented. Meanwhile, women will use language that less factual and stem from a more emotional viewpoint. Tannen also states that for most women, the language of conversation is primarily a language of rapport or a way of establishing connections and negotiating a relationship. This is done by displaying similarities and matching experiences. It is to build up the feelings of close and comfortable for each others. For most men, however, talk is primarily a mean to preserve independence and negotiate and maintain status in a hierarchical social order. This is done by exhibiting knowledge and skill and by holding center stage through verbal performance such as storytelling, joking, or imparting information. For example, men. For example, astaga. For example, men exchange information briefly in a telephone conversation to arrange a meeting. However, women will spend almost or more than an hour on the telephone talking about feelings and emotions. Deborah Tannen's distinction of information and feelings is also described as a report talk of men and women, which can be seen in the following. So here we can see that this is the report talk of men and women. Women tend to talk too much, whether men get more airtime to speak, and women also speak in private contexts. Meanwhile, men speak in public. So men feel more confidence to speak in public, and then for women in a conversation, communication is used to build relations. Women also communicate overlap and also speak symmetrically. Meanwhile, men in a conversation, use conversation to negotiate switches or avoid failure. And men also tend to speak one at a time and asymmetrically. So that's all for the third and fourth difference. Next material will be presented by Hendra. Hendra, time is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Arta, for the time. So we arrive in the types of orders versus proposal. So in order versus proposal, the difference of the language used between women and men is on the screen. Next slide, please. Tanen claims that men make orders by using more direct imperatives. Uh, Juniana stated that proposal for men is confusing. Another sources also stated that as men prefer brief informative conversation and focus on what they can do, they may use a direct imperative to ask someone else to do something. Direct imperative is considered as effective, more simple, and informative. Therefore, men may use and hear a direct imperative or direct ways to make orders. For your information, imperative is a term used to give orders or requests and confirm the will and declare prohibition. Meanwhile, for the woman often suggests that people do things in indirect ways, such as the word let's or why don't we or wouldn't it be good if we. Women feel comfortable to propose others to the things she wants. Women also can be said prefer to use proposal because feeling is considered more important for them, and giving direct imperative can hurt feelings sometimes. In conclusion, men tend to use order for asking people to do something, whereas women prefer to use proposal than order. Next slide, please. Here we can see the differences about the language used between women and men. Then men directly ask someone to do something, while women suggest someone to do something, as the example on the slide. Next slide, please. So here we arrive in conflict versus compromise. Next slide. In conflict versus compromise, in trying to prevent fights, some women refuse to oppose the will of others openly, but sometimes it's far more effective for a woman to assert herself, even at the risk of conflict. In other words, women will choose not to resist or oppose openly, but would happily do and talk it later in private or with other women. Meanwhile, men tend to openly oppose to show their status and their value on others. They feel no way to face the conflict. Next slide, please. Here the example as we can see on the slide. For the example, men immediately open up conflict by challenging someone, while women tend to avoid a conflict by giving a response that doesn't offend someone. For Arta, please back to the previous slide. Okay. For additional information, women consider to avoid and prevent a conflict by refusing to oppose the will of others openly, and women will complain later, as what I explained previously or explained before. And women think that conflict as a threat for a connection or relationship. Meanwhile, men thinks that conflict as an opportunity to expand connection or relationship. So that's all about the conflict versus compromise and others versus proposal. Thank you.
Well, thank you for the presentation. And now I would like to close the presentation. Thank you, everyone. See you.
Thank you, everyone. See you.